The Healing My Parts podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and raising awareness about dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID. We are your hosts, the system behind Healing My Parts, which also includes parts that function as a therapist and leader in a mental health niche space. We'll be sharing tips and tools that have helped us and many others, while also sharing insights from our own journey of living with the condition. We'll also be hosting guests for conversations to help educate, dispel myths, and most especially help those living with dissociative identities and professionals who treat the condition. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now, let's get healing. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to welcome Fawnn Bryant to the show today. They have an incredible breadth of experience with EMDR and living plural, and we're going to just dive into this conversation by a welcome, Fawnn. I wonder if you could just tell people a little bit about maybe what you want them to know about you.
We're an OSDD system, at the moment 15, a couple of years ago 30 of us, very covert, undifferentiated, very blendy.
I feel like there are going to be lots of folks who just started leaning forward going, wait, I feel blendy too. This is going to be great for me to know. Could you talk a little bit maybe or share a little bit about your system and how you came to discover that you're plural?
Yeah, so I was living in an unsafe home as a child and then in an unsafe marriage for 30 years, emotionally unsafe. And it took me leaving that marriage and buying a house so that I am fully in charge of this space. So the concept of a safe place mentally became reality physically in my home, that no item comes in here, no people come in here unless I and now we feel safe with that. So in having this first safe home of our lives and then having an amazing EMDR therapist, and before that, other good therapists as well. And then, so there have been 3 abusers. One died, one was divorced, cut off from another one. And there's one more thing that happened. In therapy, the gatekeeper, the person who was holding my littles back from me knowing that they existed, had a moment in therapy of feeling safe with our life and with our therapist. So at that moment, the littles were in a not very pleasant inside space and were allowed to front. And so we had hysteria for a year and then urgency for another year. We were a mess with disorganized attachment. So it was not fun, but that's how I came to know that I was plural, that I had a crisis of littles all presenting at once. I think in a lot of systems, they come out little by little or one flashback at a time, but we were like everybody. Yeah, so.
That sounds so overwhelming and painful.
Yeah, so basically 6-year-old Sunny saw that for her to function at school, she had to not have switching at school. And so she did something that could seem mean, but it was necessary for her to function at home and at school both. And she put the littles in separate stalls in what feels like a concrete garage, like different stalls, like animal stall. She didn't have the imagination to think of a more pleasant place to put them. And they weren't aware of each other and they weren't aware of me. So that spring, when they came out, we all had disorganized attachment. So we freaked out. It was a new trauma. That's where I'm trying to go.
Yeah.
That it was newly traumatic. There was transference with the therapist that she did not feel safe to us, where she had felt safe for a year and a half. And I intellectually knew she was still safe, but my system, I didn't know I had a system, but all these emotions were coming up of that she is not safe. So we had a power struggle on the drive to therapy every week. Yeah.
Oh, I'm familiar with those. Those are not a lot of fun.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Especially when there's that dissonance, right? Part of you knows that this is a safe, good space. And then those parts that have no idea who the therapist is, are they really trustworthy? Is it okay? And they're holding all of their trauma and they're holding all of their emotions. And from what you're describing, right, they're also just learning about each other and can't put into words right this moment in terms of the level of empathy for you and all of your system going through that, because it just is super challenging.
Thank you. Yeah, pretty much all those traumatic memories from early childhood came out just like boom, boom, cascade, like, a waterfall. Like, yeah, going to work, having a conversation with a friend. I just was not functional. Wasn't sleeping, was not in my window of tolerance for the entire month of June 2022. Just, I would be hyper aroused at the beginning of the workday, and then by the end of the workday, I just couldn't stay awake. So I was just like this, and then Googling all night to try and find out what was going on with me. So
Well, when you think about what was going on with you, it's kind of like, how could you be in your window of tolerance, right? That's superhuman. In many ways, I feel like systems are superhuman in what we can do. But when that starts happening and you're discovering each other and there's all of those emotions and traumas and visuals, and it seems like being in a window of tolerance in that experience is a superhuman ask.
yeah, so I didn't even know disorganized attachment existed. I didn't understand what that was. Actually, I didn't really understand it until a couple years later in retrospect. I was experiencing it, and my therapist was amazing in being willing to shoulder fault for stuff that was not her fault, because we were angry and we were scared and we were hysterical. We were hysterical for an entire year. The mental health system let me down because there should have been inpatient that could address trauma. So
Yeah.
because I was pretty much suicidal constantly, and the solution I've come to in the last 2 years. So once I'd calmed down from the hysteria and the urgency, then I came to the solution of having two therapists. I needed one to do the EMDR. And in the process of doing that, she was carrying the weight of being me blaming her for stuff that had happened before she was born. I was upset with her. She wasn't even born yet.
Details.
But it was her fault. So then what I've come up with in the last 2 years is I need a second therapist who helps me with the fallout of that, because that EMDR resolves and desensitizes stuff, and it also brings up the next emotion. And so if you picture a water, like a stream with lots of rocks, and there's a cascade of tiny little waterfalls. Blah, 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 blah. So each thing that was resolved led to something else, led to something else. And 7 days was too long to wait. So at this point, I had previously a therapist, and now I have another therapist who are available midweek
Oh, nice.
support. Yeah.
I'm curious if you'd like to share with people what drew you to EMDR in the first place.
Sure. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting story. In 2019, I was sure I had never experienced trauma, but then I was sort of having the feeling that, well, there's something like, it's probably not real trauma, but something like trauma. So I tried one modality that's local. I had a very good therapist help me for a year, and it was a year because I thought I was healed. So she works with IFS, and then there's a local modality called intensive trauma response. So um, writing stories, validation through storytelling. And when I left that, and then like 3 months later realized, oh, wow, no, the workplace bullying isn't over. Like I'm not healed. I had known that EMDR is like, I'm very much evidence-based. So EMDR was attractive because it is evidence-based as effective. So I had moved to a new house and wanted a new therapist geographically close to my house, and she is amazingly close. She's 1 mile from my house, so it's very convenient. And I just hit the jackpot. So I would say that most EMDR therapists are not experienced enough to do to yeah are not experienced enough to work even with single event people, but they have to learn somehow. So I don't know how you get past that. But very few therapists, EMDR therapists, are able to work with systems.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I hit the jackpot, but I just hit the jackpot. She knows how to work with systems. She knows how to have multiple parts. She knows how at the end of the session to say, so today these three parts came up. How's this one feeling? How's this one feeling? Is this one ready? Are you all ready to leave? Like, how are you doing? Like, she knows how to bring closure and make sure that we're not rushing out. So, yeah.
That's phenomenal. I know therapists who have gone to get EMDR training, some of them with lived experience, and they're told, sorry, you can't even get training, even though you've been a therapist for many years because you're a system. And many people who have also gotten EMDR training who have been told, don't ever do this with people who have DID and OSDD, no matter what. And that's why I have a huge appreciation for Jamie Marich and her offering that training through ICM for folks to really learn how to deliver that for systems.
Yeah, so it's really important that we all grant grace to therapists and not expect them to be expert at EMDR for single events. So I'm going to give a little language. So
Okay.
People get trained in EMDR and they've been trained. So it's kind of like somebody just learned how to drive, but they're not really a good driver yet. They just know how to drive. They haven't passed the test yet. And then they get certified. So officially, they're officially ready, but maybe for single event, not for complex trauma. So I don't know how a system can figure out if somebody is good at EMDR with systems, except just to try, because I believe that there are therapists who just intuitively get systems. And so if you are trained in EMDR and then you understand the concept of having a system, then yeah, that's probably like there are just not enough therapists for systems right there. And then there are not enough therapists for EMDR to do EMDR with systems. So to some extent, it's probably a matter of a system looking for an EMDR therapist to be open to a little bit of training of the therapist, but it had better be gentle training. So as soon as that therapist is doing things and saying things counter to what is good for you, then no, that's not the right person. Or maybe you can say it. But anyway, so there's an intuitive understanding of systems, and then there's an intuitive understanding of EMDR, and somebody can be trained in both of those and not get it. And I don't want to criticize those people. I'm not judging those people. I'm saying we as systems have to protect ourselves by making sure we don't set ourselves up, that we don't expect therapists to be good at something when so some people are good drivers and some people are not. And we all learn to drive, but that doesn't mean we're good at it. So I advise systems to be very cautious and therapists to be humble because what happened between me and my EMDR therapist, I think there was a lot of new stuff that came up. Like my disorganized attachment was very chaotic. And yeah, so any therapist is going to be challenged to work with the next system and the next system.
That makes a ton of sense. I was going to actually ask you a question about advice for systems that are nervous about EMDR, but I think that question will end up being more meaningful if I pin it and instead kind of circle back to you describing EMDR as being basically life-changing for you and your system. And I wonder if you could walk us through what made it so effective, what made it feel effective, be so wonderful for people to hear a little more about that if you can share.
Yeah, so we're very blendy in day-to-day life. I am not always sure who's telling me an emotion or affection. I I've told them, I can't figure you out. Who is this? And they're okay with that. They're okay with that. Don't always know who it is. So EMDR for that gave us, my therapist and I, a way to focus in on this part. Because we're so blendy, I don't know how I would know my part's stories and their needs. And I don't know how I would have a relationship with them one-on-one. So in a system where parts are more differentiated, and I get the sense that maybe these parts are differentiated and then these others are maybe less differentiated, that there's all kinds of variety. But if there's differentiation and if the parts are verbal, then maybe this part is able to say, well, this is my story. This is how I was formed, and this is what I need, and this is my role in the system. So if a part is verbal and is differentiated, then I still think EMDR is going to be helpful, but it was especially helpful for us because we are not differentiated and because even my teens are not verbal. I mean, occasionally they'll journal, but not out loud. So that's one reason. Another reason is we were hysterical. So we were so suicidal. We were so out of control that I needed a modality that was going to take this piece. And it was so annoying at the time. It's part of what I was angry at my therapist about. Like, we need to go fast. We need to do this for 40 hours a week. We need to, this is way too overwhelming. I'm drowning. Yeah, it's a fire hydrant. I'm drowning in the fire hydrant. But EMDR gave a way to focus on. So one thing that my therapist is excellent at is that she sees the emotion you come into the session with, and she goes with that. So even though 2 days ago, this was the highest priority, and I come in saying, oh, well, no, that's not what I want to, I want to do this. She's going to go with what is going on, what the big deal emotion is today, now. She's going to, or a lot of times she and I compromise that there's a connection between the two, and we end up doing all of it. You can't steer the car. You can't make that happen. It just happens by accident. But so it was crucial for me in my disorganized attachment and hysteria. If I had not had EMDR, well, I think my system wouldn't have revealed if we didn't have EMDR. That EMDR was part of the safety. So I really feel for systems that go to an EMDR therapist and don't have a relationship with that therapist or with EMDR before their crisis, before they have a crisis. So I had a relationship with EMDR and I had a relationship with my therapist before all this happened. Did I answer the question?
Yes. And a follow-up to that question is, was there a moment for you all when you were going to therapy and having EMDR where all of a sudden you just sort of felt like things are really moving the way that I need them to move? Like, this is really kind of magical for us.
It took 3 years. I would say that now. And it's only half magical because we still have a lot of vigilance. But at this point, we're ending up with single topics, one topic at a time. Like 3 years ago, it was like 30 topics at a time. So it's only starting to get magical this year, and it's only half magical. But what I would say for systems that say, oh my goodness, 3 years and wow, that's a lot of work, is that other systems who are friends of mine are still learning who their parts are, like maybe have known their system for 30, 40 years, and they're still, oh, here's another part, and here's another part. And we did it like, first of all, I have a small system, so that's part of it. But another part of it is that EMDR made it so everybody was jealous. Wait a minute, she got to work with them, do it yesterday. I want to do it today. What do you mean I have to wait 6 days? And I finally was saying to my therapist, these are little parts. They don't know how to wait 6 days for the next session. So parts got jealous that they didn't get a turn. And that first year, 22, 23, it did seem like it was this part for a couple sessions and then this part, but it was like this natural progression. I would learn that, oh, that was scary. Oh, Like each event, there was a reason my system revealed in the order they did. And there was a reason we took breaks in between. And there was a certain amount of all of that that wasn't going to happen unless I cut off from a certain person.
Do you feel like those points were really clear while they were happening? Because sometimes people will say, oh, I went through this and looking back, I can see that there was a clear reason. Or did you feel like as those things were happening, you could feel the reason? So you knew why you were taking a break, or you could understand why things were revealing themselves in the way that they were.
We were angry, impatient. There was nothing good.
That sounds right.
There was nothing was good. And even just last fall, my second therapist will say, oh, well, there's good news. Oh, wow, well, there's progress. And I was like, wow, none of this is good. This is all bad. Yeah, so no, I couldn't see it. I did record it thoroughly, compulsively. I made sure that I had a Word doc for each part's stories and emotions and experiences. And I, yeah, kept was journaling 100, 150 pages a month in my regular journal, in addition to my parts journals. So I was recording the progress, and I do recommend that for all systems. Any good news is in italics in any journal. So if something is good, okay, I don't want to be a pessimist and say that there's no good, but no, the bad is still it's still worse. But yeah, so I guess part of what's magical now, to answer that question, is that so much has been desensitized that we're down to single topics instead of 30 different emotional crises in the same hour. So yeah, the good news coming, I'm able to be in a public setting and have a conversation with somebody who is not plural, and I have started to not feel like I'm masking. I've started to feel like I'm just talking about my life because my plural crises are not at the front of my brain at the moment. They're sometimes instead of all the time. So they were all the time back then.
That's such a beautiful description and explanation of how it was working for you guys. And I think so beneficial for people to know because, when you've been in pain for a long period of time, or you're feeling really confused and you start an intervention like EMDR, I think sometimes we have, or at least littles in the system, have this expectation that it's going to feel all better by Saturday, and it's Tuesday. And to hear someone like you say, this has been a life-changing modality for us, and it took us 3 years. That's a lot of days back to back lined up, right? Of what sounds like some pretty intensive work for you guys. And the dedication to logging and tracking and journaling and exploring in between probably led to some of those pivotal moments that you guys have had. And I just, therapist parts in us, right, that are like, let's pause for a moment and highlight this for people who are looking for the magic bullet to happen in 7 days to say, actually, it is a lot
Yeah.
of work and it's that dedication and commitment. What kept you guys going?
As host, I was dedicated and still am to every single part of my system feeling seen and heard by me and by, at this point, two therapists. So they didn't get seen and heard. We lived with people who were abusive to us for 50 years of our life. So that is a lot of invisibility. And I am able to see them. And I was committed to them, like, not, oh, okay, I know you're there. That means I've seen you, but that they feel seen, right? That we're not done until they feel like they have been seen and heard and valued.
Was that commitment for you organic, or did you have to work on it? I'm asking really because there's this conflict for a lot of people, right? Where it's like, I know that I have these parts present. I know I go to therapy. I know my therapist is used to seeing these things. And I'm holding, whether it's, I don't know, shame, embarrassment, or insecurity, feeling too vulnerable to allow them to be seen. And there's this big struggle, for that, to allow that to happen. And I don't know if you experienced any of that or if you just sort of organically from the get-go were like all in dedicated to each part being able to be seen by to therapists?
That is such a good question. So, you know how we as systems grow up, so it's all the wrong reasons that we have empathy, and all the wrong reasons that we can read people's minds, and all the wrong reasons that we have strengths in X, Y, and Z, right? So, my upbringing gave me a strength in caring about other children. I didn't know I had inside children, but caring, so almost all, until I was around age 50, all of my employment, everything I got paid to do was about all ages of children, babies through teenagers. So I did all kinds of various things, something different every 5 years, but I was always working with children, and I was always caring for them to feel visible, valued, vocal. That was important to me. And so all of that, it's a negative word, I don't know a better word, groomed me. What's a better word? Formed, shaped, gave me a skill set, an expertise in different developmental stages, and expertise in how to comfort upset children. Although none of the outside children I ever took care of were traumatized. So yeah, I wasn't prepared for traumatized children, but all of that set me up so that as my parts revealed, I already knew how to work with any age of child. And I already had a commitment to the children of the world. Like, one of the things I have to put in a container is the idea that right over here, somewhere within a mile radius, there are at least 5 children having things happen to them that used to happen to me. And I have to ignore that. I just have to ignore that. But here were some children. So my metaphor is that in spring 22, it felt like Child Protective Services drove up, parked in front of my house, dropped off all these littles and all these teens, knocked on the door, drove away, and I show up at the door, and there are all these hysterical, traumatized children and teens. And I don't know that they're traumatized, and I don't know why they're at my door. Like, all of a sudden I had a whole system, and I didn't know that systems existed. I didn't know that plural people existed. I mean, yeah, in the 1970s, I watched that movie. So there's this one person in the entire United States who has a system, but not most people.
Right.
Right. And I want to throw out some stats. So I love stats, love evidence. Temple in 2019 said that 12% of the population is plural. This is not a minority. That's 12% of the population has, I think he might have said, a dissociative disorder. I forget exactly his language, but most of dissociative disorders are OSDD or DID. So yeah, that's one. And then the other really important statistic is Madigan in 2023 says that 48% of the population has insecure attachment, as in they did not get what they needed as very little people. So maybe they're coping, maybe they healed, maybe they married somebody that they're attached to now. But that doesn't mean they're still insecurely attached. But I think it's very important that anybody out there that thinks that this is just a little problem knows that this is 12% is dissociative, and 23% is, I'm sorry, 48% is insecure, has insecure attachment. This is not a little bit of extra something that a therapist who's already out of grad school should then be paying money to get trained in. This is something that grad schools should be training every future therapist to do. They should be trained in EMDR. They should be trained in attachment healing, attachment-based therapy. Yeah, so there's my plug. That's my soapbox.
I can assure you that in grad schools, therapists are not trained in DID and OSDD. And while we all got some training in attachment theory and treatment, I can guarantee almost no one got enough.
Yeah, who knows how to deal with disorganized attachment? How many therapists out there know what to do when I arrive in your session angry at you for something you didn't do? So my therapist very wisely, actually both of them, have allowed me to be upset with them, allowed me to fire them, allowed me to come back, no questions asked, And in the process between the two of them, I am 75% healed of my attachment wound.
That's beautiful.
That is a statement, but it took a lot of firings and a lot of my last 3 years has been intensive, like 12 hours in a week, 20 hours in a week, 5 hours in a week of therapy. It's been a lot of chaos. So disorganized attachment is not for the weak of heart. Another plug for therapy, graduate schools. In nursing, they weed you out before you graduate. If you're not going to be able to handle acute care, if you're not going to be able to handle the anxiety, like nursing is a whole bunch of practical stuff, but nurses are mostly people who manage anxiety, other people's anxiety, and I have to save your life, and that's anxiety producing. So nurses don't graduate from nursing school if they are not made of the tough stuff. They're weeded out early in the program, which felt really cruel at the time. Like, wow, I finally got here. Why are you being so mean to me? And then that doesn't mean you're done. You still have to pass boards. So people who become nurses have already run the gauntlet. It is unfortunate to me that therapists are allowed to have a license and to do therapists. Some therapists are like doing trial and error on people who have been traumatized. Therapists should not be allowed to do trial and error on people who are traumatized. That we should be being gentle with this 12% who have dissociative disorders and this 48% who have insecure attachment. And for whatever it's worth, the other 52%, they're not in therapy more than 3 sessions. They're not the majority of the clients. So we're pretty much talking about most of a therapist's caseload.
A lot of therapists don't know the statistics around DID, OSDD, dissociation at all. So I know that if people go into school to become social workers, counselors, psychologists, thinking, I'm going to specialize in, pick an area. I'm going to specialize in mood disorders. I'm going to specialize in substance use. I'm going to specialize in eating disorders. And they think, I'm not going to do trauma work. I'm not going to deal with dissociation. I don't need to know that. And that belief is supported through the type of education that we get in school. So I do a lot of training now for people who are eating disorder specialists, as well as generalists in DID and OSDD, and people's mouths drop when they hear the statistics that there is no way that practitioners don't have people who have DID and OSDD on their caseload. They absolutely do. Statistically, it's impossible for you not to. But people don't know what to look for. And there's this belief that it's, quote, so rare that they'll never see it and they don't have training in it. So it's kind of that you kind of can't know what you don't know, but we're like really responsible for getting this information out so that, yeah, people aren't doing inadvertent harm and they are able to recognize folks and they do know how to deliver care, because you're bringing up so many good points about relational work that needs to happen to help heal attachment wounds.
That's first. Okay, so you don't want to do EMDR. You don't feel qualified to work with the trauma. You don't want to hear those trauma stories. I get that. Like in nursing, some people do ED and some people are not cut out, and hospice, and some people aren't cut out for that. They want something, in a doctor's office or whatever. Same thing, but every single therapist should be able to do attachment-based therapy. That is just basic. I don't know where this comes from, so I don't know. I can't reference this, but I hear that most of the DSM is caused by trauma. So I don't know where. So if someone has an eating disorder, something happened in their past so that they cope by having an eating disorder or an addiction or OCD or ADHD, whatever you want to name, something bad happened when they were very little. I mean, you're the therapist, maybe could somebody have a wonderful childhood and then at age 20, something happens and then I guess that could happen, but I'm thinking.
Yeah, it does. It's for things like, I mean, I can speak specifically to eating disorders for sure, right? It's a complex interplay of genetics, biological factors interacting with the person's environment and temperament. And that constellation of factors together can produce an eating disorder, very often triggered by some type of event that is experienced as trauma. So we know in the eating disorder field that 90% of our clients, and most of us would say more, have trauma histories with around 50%, possibly more, meeting criteria for PTSD. And we know that 40-ish percent of folks with DID and OSDD have eating disorder. So like there is an inextricable trauma link there. At the same time, I have friends who are specialists with OCD who also say that is a trauma diagnosis. It's basically the fallout of trauma. Certainly substance abuse, the same. We have such huge amounts of trauma that people experience in their lifespan that it's interesting to think about the DSM as, the vast majority of it being caused by trauma. It's probably true. I haven't really dug into that statement, but I could see it.
I think Gabor Mate said something, maybe not exactly, please don't quote me on that, but there's something like that, that if a therapist is going to work with any diagnosis, they're going to end up with some people who have
Yeah.
trauma. Like, yeah, just any depression, anxiety. My therapist says that so I have a primary and an adjunct. My primary therapist says that people show up at her door saying that they have anxiety. And then later it comes out that they're dissociative or, have, so.
I was listening to a Dr. Mike Lloyd from the UK, and he was talking about, can every practice basically screen for dissociation? Like, while clients are in the waiting room, it does not take long to have them fill out the DES-2. It's, 10 minutes maybe. And that, he was saying it's also easy to score. Add up the number and divide by the number of questions, and anything over 30, something's going on there. What if that were standard practice?
Exactly. That's a great idea.
It really is. And people don't do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure my primary therapist was doing it in her head. Like, she never handed me a paper, but she was like watching for signs over time. So we didn't, yeah, there's the subject of all the different comorbidities. And so ours would be autoimmune, hypersensitivities, skin. We have a lot. Like at the moment we have three, three going on at once. So when we're stressed, then we get multiple skin or allergies or hormonal imbalance. But I want to put out there that I don't hear a lot of talk about this. My newborn part learned to escape emotional and physical neglect by derealizing. So that is my explanation for how I didn't end up with an addiction or an eating disorder, because that is at the moment I seem to be healed of it. I've only derealized 4 weeks in the last year, where before that it would have been 6 months, like half of every year would have been derealization, DPDR. But anyway, so we have experienced DPDR as an escape, like losing oneself in a drug. So I think it's an important topic that we as a plural community haven't talked about, that when somebody has their first trauma as neglect, I know that some people have traumas before they're newborns, like in utero. And then there's the whole topic of transgenerational trauma. So I am experiencing something not because it happened to me, but because it happened to somebody in my ancestry. But the topic of how newborn neglect, because we've got everybody born in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, their parents were taught, don't hold that baby, don't feed that baby. Every 4 hours, don't spoil the baby. So there are at least 3 decades. And then, of course, a lot of people born after that were raised the same way. I mean, still, people my age, grandmothers, are still telling their granddaughters, oh no, don't hold that baby. Put the baby down. The baby's sleeping. Put the baby down. So there are whole generations of people. I wonder how many people escape with derealization.
Probably lots. I mean, when you think about it, as an infant, we don't have a lot of options in how we cope. There's basically dissociation and dissociation.
Yep. And it worked really well for us, but unfortunately it meant that in adulthood, we couldn't make real connections, like we couldn't have authentic relationships. That's part of why now is magical. That's part of the being 75% healed. The attachment part is healed. The DPGR was an attachment wound. It was a coping mechanism for attachment wounding. But that's part of why now I am just now this, like it's only been a month, able to like be authentic in friendships. I don't know if my friends really understand that. The ones I've had for decades and the ones that I just am newly friends with, I am doing something entirely new right now. I have never been able to connect with people.
That's
Yeah.
huge. And when you think about the work that you did, which are a combination of EMDR and relational work, because therapy as a relationship, learning that you can have big feelings about what a therapist does and they're not going to abandon you. And I think
Mm,
especially for people who are systems, I really feel like we have a level of radar that we can pick up on somebody being inauthentic. So if a therapist is denying accountability for something that they did, even if it's a misunderstanding, right? We can misunderstand a tone of voice or a mannerism based on our own histories. So we learned how to survive some really awful situations and circumstances. And so we sometimes do that by reading other people's body language, reading expressions, reading the energy in the room. But when you apply that to a functional person, what we're reading isn't the same as what we were reading in our childhood. And it's really easy for that to bring up all kinds of really big feelings in the context of therapy. But when you have a therapist who can say, yeah, you're right. I was doing that and I apologize, but it might not be exactly what you think. Let me tell you what was happening for me. And you get to work that out in a really transparent, respectful, honest way. That's healing. And then it really
yeah.
can allow us, right, to move into other relationships in our lives in a different way.
Yeah, relationship rupture and repair is I think what you're talking about. And I need it to be said that these two amazing therapists I'm working with right now have both said things that made me angry or scared or sad or fire them and let me leave and let me choose to come back. Let me look around and say, oh, wow, they're the best I've got. I can't find anyone else that good. So but they let me come back. I want to make the point that if somebody out there is having a hard time with their therapist, it may not be that the therapist isn't a good fit. It may be that we as systems are used to like squelching our own needs and not saying what we need. So here's the example. A year ago, I had a 13-year-old part who was having black and white thinking, and my therapist was pointing that out appropriately, but it was not the right time. So it was a traumaversary month, and my family of origin taught us to have black and white thinking. Like that's the way to be good, is it's either this or this is good and this is bad. This is, this is of God and this is of the devil. And like it was very black and white. You don't snack. I break that rule.
Good.
So yeah, no, I'm in favor. We have that in common. I am in favor of eating. I believe in eating. Eating is a good thing.
It's a very good thing.
It's a very good thing. So I had like three, like, first of all, we were taught black and white thinking that being a good girl means be black and white. Second of all, black and white is a trauma response. And then third, teens are prone to black and white. So I was so angry at my therapist that session. She was being appropriate to bring this up, but and then my teens, because they're blendy, because they don't front and speak in using the body's voice, email is the best way for them. So she was able to tell the therapist by email, I'm angry about this, blah, 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 blah. And as Cindy said, this is just, I hear you. I hear you. The black and white thinking is not the best way. It's not the right time. And she was able to back off, let that be my choice. So there's a consent thing. I'm not consenting to talking about black and white thinking. That is not what we're not going there. I'm protecting my 13-year-old, like we need to work with her on her terms and she's not ready. And then I forget what it was. Like it feels like by August or maybe October, and then maybe next June, a year later, we were ready to look. She and I were ready to look together. The 13-year-old and I were ready to look at black and white versus not. So I guess, yeah, this is a very long-winded answer to, explanation that if you as a system are not feeling comfortable because your therapist is using vocabulary, modalities, ways of, if they're thinking about, if their mindset doesn't fit your mindset, we as systems, unfortunately, have to train our therapists. Even my two excellent therapists have needed me to tell them, even though they both are really good with systems and really good at, so the word consent is necessary in therapy with systems, because systems are going to let people get away with things that aren't good for the system. Like there's a level of assertiveness. So I have had the privilege of being assertive with, I've learned to be assertive with not just these two, but therapists before that this is working for me. And this is, so here's another example. I don't understand CBT for systems. I guess some systems like it. But that's another answer to the EMDR question. I have to start out with, here's the scary event or this scary emotion, and there's where I'm going to end up, but I'm not there yet. I have to CBT myself. EMDR gently CBTs me. It gently confronts. I have to first just wallow in the awfulness and grieve and cry. And I feel like I've spent probably 20 non-consecutive hours sobbing in EMDR. So I want to say grief is a huge piece of it. I have to do all that wallowing before I can get to the place that I'm ready to change my belief. I can't just go to the change belief. So CBT wasn't right for us, my system. Maybe it is for some systems, because I know it's out there, and I know plural therapists, people who are therapists and also plural, use CBT. I do not understand that. A lot of my system's trauma came because people who were bigger and older and had more power than us told us we were wrong and didn't ask our consent. So yeah, that's, I'm going on bunny trails here, but that feels very important to me to say, that if your therapist is using CBT, is telling you, is wanting to change your beliefs conversationally, and if that doesn't feel good to you, you are allowed to say, I don't like CBT. It's not my thing. You're allowed to tell the therapist. The therapist is not the expert on your system. The therapist is the expert on the modalities they've been trained in, and the client, and more so the plural client than even other clients, the plural client has to be the expert on whether this works for me today.
Dovetailing on that it's really important for therapists to pay attention to a couple of rules of thumb, which would be you can only move as fast as the slowest part in the system. So trying to do something like CBT with the part that might be fronting might make sense for the part that's fronting. But if that is not the part that the emotion or the problematic situation is rooted in, it's not going to be effective anyway. And it's only going to sort of pour salt in the wound of whatever part is holding the wound or the problematic situation, right? Like CBT it's an interesting animal, because it's been studied so much and we can show change, blah, blah, blah. But so many people experience CBT as it feels a lot like gaslighting sometimes. And when you don't, especially when the therapist is not aware that there's a system present or isn't exploring who else in the system is involved with whatever it is that we're talking about today, CBT can end up doing harm. Oh, I suppose almost any modality can end up doing harm if it's misapplied, you're misattuned, or you're not really careful with how you're working with the system itself. So being thoughtful and creative, I think, is really important, and paying attention and asking questions of the person. So who else, what other parts of your system is involved in this thought process, right? Or this feeling that you're dealing with? Is it just you, or are there more?
Yep. And that's part of that, gets back to EMDR then. So EMDR gave us the freedom to go as slow as the part of the day. So we could just like get stuck and just be stuck. And then my therapist is very good at getting us back to maybe where we started the session, like, how are you feeling about that? Like getting us unstuck, but maybe it's going to take 3 sessions to work through this very big thing. So that your word gaslighting is very important. Therapists, if you know that this client is safe right now, but they don't feel safe right now, it doesn't help to tell them that they're safe. It just doesn't. Yeah. And there's a quirky thing. So a lot of my work has been, so my primary parent was dismissive avoidant. She's deceased now, but so dismissive avoidant people trigger our system enormously. And that's our disorganized attachment came in response to dismissive avoidant people. When I'm in EMDR, I have to be able to come to this new belief that I'm open to not being black and white anymore, or that I'm open to that I am safe now. For me to come to that, I have to come to it by after a full session, not by 10 minutes into the session or by a year. Maybe I'm like chipping away at that belief in April of one year, and then maybe I can't really come to closure with that until April of the next year or 3 years. So for us, it's been 3 years for some of these concepts. Yeah.
That's one of the most important messages, I think, is for people to really honor the wisdom of their own system, because everyone's path is unique. Everyone's system's path is unique. And I think that's true for therapists too. Like, pay attention to the individual and system sitting in front of you and follow their lead. Like, when we talk about we can only meet the clients where they're at. When you're working with systems, there's more than one part that's present. So you got to make sure you're meeting parts where they're at, not just the person who might be fronting in that moment in that day. You had also mentioned, because I think this is so common when therapists say, just tell that part that the trauma is not happening anymore. Let the part know that it's safe. And there are so many people who will never feel safe, regardless of the knowledge that maybe X event is not occurring in this moment in time. And I think it's important that we start changing and shifting our language from safe to maybe safe enough. And
Exactly.
also recognizing and understanding that this idea of simply telling clients to let their parts know that the trauma isn't happening anymore is not actually an intervention. It's not a solution to the grief or to the anxiety or to the discord that's happening within the system. Sometimes I think we're looking for these quick fixes for people, and it's incredibly invalidating. And what you can end up doing is sending your clients into a shame spiral, because we start getting the message of like, I should be able to tell that part that it's not happening right now and I should feel fine. And I don't. And now I don't feel like I can ask for more help or more coaching or co-regulation because that was supposed to fix it. So I must be failing at this. It's a really crappy place for a client to have to go.
Yeah. So that's really important. Most of my trauma was emotional abuse, and gaslighting, not events. I think for a lot of systems, there are a lot of events and maybe not as much like if somebody didn't, so to me, dismissive avoidant people are equivalent to narcissists, but different. Like it's very confusing to have a conversation with somebody who is transactional and is scared of connecting. So all the usual social rules are actually backfire. So when I had desensitized, the majority of what I was going to desensitize in 2022, 2023, I still had dismissive avoidant people in my life. And as because I'm in my 60s, I'm 63, I am aware that the time is going to come when somebody else besides me is going to be in charge of this body. So if dismissive avoidant people are the ones that are going to be in charge of the body, I am returning to when my primary parent was dismissive avoidant. So how can I ever feel safe? That's one example where, yeah, this house is safe and I only let safe people in this house. And yeah, I leave jobs where I get bullied. And yeah, I know better. I know how to figure out who the emotionally and physically and other kinds of abusive people are. I know how to do this. My ability to read the room is excellent right now. I know what to look for. I know to watch out for people who are possessive. The three things: possessive, poor boundaries, and entitled. I think those are the three. But there are still people in my life who are dismissive avoidant, and I am 63, and I am in excellent health, but someday somebody's going to have to take care of me. And if all the people available are dismissive avoidant, I don't know how I can ever feel safe with that. So there are reasons that your client may not feel safe, that may be too, like, I didn't get language for all that until this last year. I didn't learn, I knew avoidant attachment. I didn't know dismissive avoidant until November. And for anybody out there that cares, there is a huge difference. So, anxious, avoidant, and whatever the other one is, those are like superficial. But dismissive avoidant is it's a trip. It's dismissive avoidant is living with gaslighting is what it is. So
Which then that's so easily recreated or could be easily created in the therapeutic environment if your primary modality is CBT with only one part with the kind of blinders on for the rest of the system. So you can completely recreate that dynamic accidentally over and over again.
yeah. And I hear that CBT is very popular, that there are a whole, like that is seen in some circles as the primary modality. So yeah, go ahead and learn it. But just please be gentle. Because if I have had gaslighting in my early childhood, then you can't tell me the answer. You could ask me a bunch of questions, and even better, I believe personally that EMDR is the more gentle way to deal with somebody who's been gaslit, because I am coming up with my own new beliefs. She's not telling me what to believe. In the course of the session, have multiple parts coming together saying, oh, well, wait a minute, that doesn't feel so bad. Let's go over there, and I'm gradually coming to a positive belief in my own brain I'm CBTing myself during EMDR. Yeah. It's a very gentle modality for people who have been gaslit.
I think too, you're bringing the body in, where CBT is really it's kind of intellectual in some ways where we're asking people to come up with a different cognition. If we're saying that your beliefs and your cognitions influence your feelings and therefore your behavior, what is a different belief? What are some other possibilities that you can try on? That's an intellectual pursuit versus EMDR is helping something move from essentially like the amygdala, hippocampus parts of your brain through the corpus callosum into the frontal cortex. We have things that are literally biologically changing and pathways in the brain that are changing. And as we do more and more research, right, we're finding out how important brain-based interventions are and somatic interventions are, and how can we release that from the body? And EMDR can do both of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that there are many systems? I'm guessing the majority of systems have pre-verbal parts. And because there are pre-verbal parts, then that sets the system up to then be more likely to form later parts. So one of the things that EMDR does well is give access, make a connection between the therapist and that pre-verbal part, or between the host, whoever the adult parts in the system managing the system, and those pre-verbal parts. So it gives voice without wordless voice. It gives, and so what you're saying about somatic, that is so important, because the pre-verbal parts are going to need somatics. That's body sensations. They're not going to say, oh, I hate Joe. They're not going to use words to tell you. They're going to use body sensations. And it is astounding to me, the body sensations that, yeah. So I used to not get headaches, but now I know that this headache is my newborn part, right? Oh, something's going on, but she was silenced, right? life. And now I know, oh, that means something. Yeah. And one of the silent teens, there's a lot in the throat. So there's a metaphor of silence that goes back to CSA as well. So the CSA plus the teen silencing plus, yeah, and the mouth and throat is very central.
You see that a lot across many, many systems, right? Where there's the sensation, even in therapy, of choking, of not being able to produce sound, drawings that parts will make where there's no mouth, or the mouth is sewn shut or taped shut, or, there's all sorts of that type of imagery that will come up. And EMDR really does offer a solution where you can work through that stuff without having to vocalize what's happening, and you can still move forward.
Yeah, so in terms of amount of work, my parts have traumaversary months, so they come out more then, they're more sensitive, they're more easily triggered. So I have a spring part who, yeah, I think her trauma started in February, but she seems to be around, and she's caregiver to insiders too. So she's around a lot. It has taken her 5 springs. She still doesn't talk to me in words. She's 12, right? She knows fucking words. She's still scared to talk to, she's not scared of me. She still sees it as unsafe for the system if she uses the body to make words to talk to me at home alone. Like, I'm not saying in public, I'm not saying when we're with our therapist, I'm saying at home alone with just me, who is safe after 5 seasons of EMDR. But she is able to talk to me with the throat now. Like, I'm able, and other things. She has ways of showing me affection and showing me, I agree with you. And hey, did you forget? Did you forget I'm here? I'm still here. She's able to say hi. And yeah, so I'm not getting a sense of how much to say about this. Yeah, I'm going to say it. So she had a season 2 years ago of experiencing herself. If you know what a Gumby doll is, it's like a wire doll that's covered with plastic, and it's bendy. She was in the throat as a Gumby doll.
Oh, wow.
She was trapped, like it was a trap. She was trapped in there. And then during those sessions, sometimes the throat would get like larger than life, like 2 feet wide, and then sometimes it would be so small, and sometimes it couldn't breathe. And it's taken us 5 springs of doing throat stuff, and yeah, we're 75% healed. So
Was there ever a time for your system where EMDR didn't feel helpful? And if so, how did you navigate that with your therapist?
I had spent a year and a half feeling better every time we did EMDR. So I arrived in spring 2022 thinking that this hysteria is going to be solved in an hour after an EMDR session. So I kept showing up. So it wasn't until retrospect that I realized that was a moment. I didn't know that there were plural people. I certainly didn't know that I was a system. That was a moment. For one thing, I remember in May 22 thinking that I needed 3 2-hour EMDR sessions per week, which wasn't going to happen, but that was my measure of how much therapy I needed. And in retrospect, I think what I actually needed, I needed as soon as we became hysterical, I needed a second therapist. Yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly straight on, but I needed that second therapist to be very good at parts. So either to be a system, or even IFS language works, structural dissociation language works, somebody who could just say, so who are you feeling right now? And last night you had that bad dream. How old do you think that part? I needed my EMDR therapist, and maybe she would have done this with me, but I needed either her or a second therapist who could talk to me about my parts. I needed to be told that there are systems. That it sounds like I've got parts, like that was this brand new thing my system was so covert, so protected us from ever switching, that I didn't know I had parts. I needed somebody to say, okay, you feel like you have a baby and a toddler and a teen. Tell me more about that. And then we would figure out, oh no, there are many babies, many toddlers. This is not one baby. But just to be able to give me language and sort out. I needed a pause from April 22 until my therapist told me my diagnosis in August 22. And I had to ask her. So I wonder if maybe some people don't want to know, or maybe I just didn't let her get a word in edgewise. But in August 22, I said, do you have a word name? Do you have language for this? What is going on with me? And she said OSDD. So then we were able to talk about that. But I needed somebody to help me, I think, as a second therapist, a second. So it wasn't that EMDR was bad. It was that I didn't have language for parts. So I couldn't work in EMDR for a while.
It makes so much sense to me. And sometimes I think this might be also my preference leaning into more relational work, for the therapist parts of my own system. I think EMDR is really powerful. And as humans, sometimes I think we need the narratives that go along with what we just experienced to be able to make sense of it. So we have both, right? We have that prefrontal cortex understanding, and then we have the felt sense and the somatic integration, and we get the whole picture. There's something sometimes that for some people can feel really incomplete when you get this sort of visual imagery or somatic movement through an EMDR session, but you don't have the words that go with it.
Yep. I needed vocabulary. I needed the terms window of tolerance. I just needed, I needed to know what causes, I needed to know that complex trauma is a thing and why it happens. And your thing about needing to have a story and know what the story is. I journaled hundreds of pages. I would tell my story, and then the next week I'd learn something else and realize, oh no, that's my story. Oh, I have complex trauma, but my childhood was perfect. Oh, this parent was not so. Oh, wow, the other parent. Oh, yeah, and then that, and then my story kept changing. My back then story and my current story kept changing. I have another answer to what you said about where EMDR wasn't doing what I needed. At that moment, we had my baby part, especially my newborn. But others were with her in this. We had a very deep pit of despair, and it was slippery and muddy getting down into it and then getting out of it. So an hour EMDR session or even 90 minutes wasn't enough. And it took me until like July, August to have language for that, to say that. I need 30 minutes just in EMDR. So clicking, I needed 30 minutes just to like approach the bottom of the pit of this slimy, muddy, dark, dank, cold, awful place that my parts were living and needed me to come to them. I needed 30 minutes of clicking just to get to them, and then 30 minutes with them, and then 30 minutes to get back out. And I also needed 30 minutes of talk, like to connect. Like my therapist we had disorganized attachment at that point. The therapist did not feel safe. So I needed conversation before and after all that EMDR, because we as a system felt like EMDR was gaslighting. And that's another answer to your question. That whole year, we went and chose to do EMDR, and yet we also thought that EMDR was changing our brain. So I had to come home after these sessions. And for 24, 48 hours, I had to say, yeah, you know what? The brain's going to change now. And that thing we believed yesterday, we're going to believe something different. And it's okay.
Yeah.
Not danger. Yeah, we're coming to new beliefs, and the new beliefs are actually good, but they're scary because they're the things that people used to tell us that things aren't as bad as we think they are. And people used to gaslight us like that. So we had to do a lot of work around that. EMDR is changing, is rewiring our brain, and it's good. And it's coming out of our own brain. There's nobody else telling us believe this new belief.
When you describe it, it sounds like it becomes this vehicle for bringing you all together. Because when you were saying, oh, like my story keeps changing, the story keeps changing, I'm sitting here thinking, I mean, yeah, that makes sense because each part is bringing an aspect of the story that you didn't have. So as each part adds whatever it's holding into the larger narrative of what happened, it's going to look different.
It is. And that is one of the beautiful things, one of the magical things about now. Current therapist, yes. And then a therapist that I had before these current therapists, and then a therapist I worked with in 2019. And then I kept going back to her in the summer. Like I needed another, for my current therapist to feel safe, I needed to go back to her. Yeah, in terms of gaslighting and disorganized. So all that to say that several therapists ago, that person helped me to bring cohesion to the system, taught me to introduce this part to this part and just sit with that a little bit. And then this part to this part. And like I would take a day and introduce each part to each other part, or bring up and taught me to have a safe inside space, and taught me to change roles. So the vigilant toddler part, to notice joy, to be vigilant about joy and connection. So yeah, the teens are now very aware. They had to do it one at a time. So there are two of them, and one did it in January, February, and one's doing it now, had to come to noticing joy. So we are at a place of feeling mostly cohesive. I don't know how to use the word fusion and integration. As a system that was always blendy, we come in and out, and that works for us. We don't need to be separate, and we don't need to be together. We are together when everything's fine, and then when there's a joyful moment, we kind of like take turns experiencing the joy, or when so we take turns. We are cohesive, and it has come more easily to us than other systems. My system is unusual that everybody inside wants me to own fronting and to own caregiving. So in some systems that would be overwhelming, but that works fair. We don't have to negotiate who's gonna front right now. And we don't have any amnesia, so we're very unique in some ways. But again, I think that there probably are a lot of OSDD systems. I think there are probably a whole bunch of OSDD systems that are like me, like our system.
Which is part of why I think your willingness to share your experience is so important, because, I'll get messages from people all the time questioning where they fit because they don't have amnesia, or they do have a level of cohesion, even though sometimes they do feel confused and blendy and they're not quite sure who's where. And, kind of the questions that a lot of them ask is, does this count? I don't want to step into this and own it if somebody's going to then rip the rug out from underneath my feet and tell me that this isn't what I think it is. And, I have so many thoughts about that too, right? Like, can we also own our experience? Nobody gets to tell you what your experience is, right? And your experience is valid because your experience is simply existing as your own experience. But I do think there's something about being able to listen to somebody else and say, oh, wow, that's me too. That happens to me too. And I've never heard anybody else say that before. That's powerful.
Yeah. So something I haven't said yet that I think is really important is I haven't done EMDR all by itself. So there are all these other things going on that support the healing. And I've pretty much done all of it, so that somebody said I'm on the fast track. We have done this probably faster than most people can, because of the hysteria and because they all revealed at once. So yeah, it was overwhelming. So EMDR is not the end all. So I've got books that have been crucial: Healing the Fragmented Parts of Selves, Janina Fisher, Complex PTSD, Pete Walker. Having community with other systems changed us.
Yeah.
And for us, we are writers. So for us, it was writing groups. So dissociative writers, and I'm in a candid expressions group. And then out of that has come one-on-one friendships, or many on many friendships. It's not one I'm on, it's many on many.
Right.
System. Yeah. And then there's walking and exercise. And for us at the moment, car camping and adventuring, hiking, kayaking, getting outside with other people, having time alone, naps. Oh my goodness, we dissociate into naps. So if something is wonderful and beautiful, I used to think, oh, I'm so lazy. Why am I taking so many naps? But we dissociate. It's so beautiful that it's overwhelming that we dissociate into a nap. So I have learned to value naps as a part of healing. So anyway, there are a bunch of other things that all happened at the same time as the EMDR. It was not just that.
I think that's important for people to hear, and you've brought so many great examples of how it's been life-changing and it sounds like really been a catalyst for bringing your system together with more understanding of each other, right? And how you all communicate and recognize each other and respect each other. And that's a beautiful thing. For people who are listening, I mean, you would sort of, in a way, I'm kind of circling back to almost a beginning part of the conversation. We're like, oh, I'm going to pin that for a second. You were talking about people looking for EMDR and checking in about, does the therapist have experience working with systems, or, do they have knowledge of that, or can they get that knowledge? For people who are curious but nervous about EMDR, what would you want them to know or to look for in a therapist? Can you think of potentially questions that you might suggest somebody ask as they're exploring it?
Yeah, the moment the questions to ask aren't coming to mind, I think it's a matter of going to 3 sessions and feeling how you feel. I think more important than EMDR is, are they attachment based? Are they open to you not always thinking and acting like an adult, and to you feeling big emotions, like feeling dysregulated? Are you allowed to, like, is it always, like you said with CBT, is it always going to be an intellectual conversation, or can that just help you? So I didn't have parents who helped me learn to emotional regulate. And I am watching parents of very little people now do that. And it's just beautiful. Can the therapist help you? When you are dysregulated, can they like sit with you? Oh, you're sad. Yeah, tell me about the sadness. Or maybe you're not even feeling verbal right now. I see you're feeling sad. So maybe this isn't a verbal part that's feeling sad. And can they do the attachment-based thing? That's really important in any therapist. And then, do they believe you?
Yeah.
I had a therapist when I was in this 2022 needing an adjunct therapist. I went to somebody who listened to my story the first session, and I thought, oh, this is great. This is a great therapist. And then the second session told me that I was really wrong to think that my biological family should be held at arm's length, that they were the people I should be going to for support. And yeah, so she was not believing that I have good reasons to hold biological family at arm's length. And I will say that all my good therapists at points have not believed something, or have just not understood that I am not safe right now, then allowed me to collect, be mad, maybe email, whatever, be mad, and come back in the future and be mad and say, that didn't work for me, and are they going to regroup and say, okay, from now on, I'm not going to say that you are safe right now. From now on, I'm not going to say that you need to get past black and white thinking. Do they believe you? Do they meet where you are? And then I guess to work with a system, you have to be open to switching and chaos, and like, wow, do they even know what disorganized attachment is? Do they know what anxious preoccupied is? Like, do they have the superficial definitions of attachment, or do they understand the chaos that comes?
Yeah.
What was your swag about?
The functional anarchy?
No, the therapist goes on vacation.
Oh, emotionally ghosted.
Emotionally ghosted. Yeah. So if you are anxious preoccupied and they're about to go on vacation, are they open to you emoting and like maybe not even being reasonable? Okay, so the therapist, that's a vacation, but that's not necessarily what some parts inside are going to feel. So are they open to you getting mad at them for ghosting them, right? So are they open to you being chaotic? And are they meet you where you are, and multiple parts? So that my list of things to make sure isn't very concise and easy. But with EMDR, like, I don't know, because I can picture my current EMDR therapist as a beginner and me as her first plural EMDR client, and I see her potential. So I see potential for EMDR therapists working with systems. So I don't want there to be a list that this is what they have to already have. I think these other three are more important, that they're attachment-based, that they believe you, and that they change their language, right? So if I don't want you to use this word because there's a particular word that I was called by a particular abuser, and like that word is triggering. So don't use that word, right? So like there is vocabulary that works for me and vocabulary. So are they willing to adjust their vocabulary? And that actually means, so what I'm learning about my therapist is that they know how to not let themselves get gaslit by me. So if I am believing something that they know isn't true, and they're letting me believe it, and they're using a language that lets me believe that until I'm ready to move on, they have to inside themselves also know their reality. They have to hold, a good therapist has to be able to hold my narrative and their narrative in their head.
When you were talking, the other thing that came up for me while I was listening is the importance of the therapist to use language that's non-judgmental and non-pathologizing, right? So it's, yes, be open to talking to all different parts, be open to this, whatever the client is bringing in from a lens of compassion and empathy, not from a lens of pathologizing, shaming, trying to curb somebody's behavior in that moment because maybe you as a therapist don't really understand what's happening in the moment. Be curious instead, right? Like, what am I missing here? What else could be going on?
Yeah, that curbing behavior, that is parent-child. That is the therapist thinking that they know what is true and trying to teach you. That therapist has not walked in your moccasins. That therapist has not your past. You are this particular kind of system because of what happened to you. And there is absolutely, like, this EMDR therapist knows me better than anyone has ever known me in my entire life. She has seen all the awfulness and all the beauty. And I'm so grateful for that. She still doesn't know everything. I'm probably going to come up with something really difficult, again and again and again. I'm not done. I'm only 5% healed. It take me the rest of my, there are a couple things that we say as in our community a lot, but one is you're never done. I have therapy for the rest of my life. I'm not going to ever be done. Yeah. And that my system is the way it is. My system is different than anybody else's because of my childhood and my upbringing. So don't try and be like anybody else. Yeah.
I love that. And I love that. I'm hoping that the therapists, that are listening are thinking about, I think many people do this really well. So this does not by any means apply to every therapist out there. But for those that were trained primarily in cognitive or behavioral or both modalities, you can't always look at somebody and think that the behavior itself is a problem that needs shaping or changing, because in the way that you want to by changing a thought or giving them the directive that, the example we used earlier was, well, you're safe. So kind of stop that as the underlying message. Instead, can you, as a therapist, be curious and lean into whatever it is that the client and the system is experiencing in the moment, ask questions with empathy and compassion. What's happening? Who's feeling it? What is it stemming from? And show them with your own, we call it, unconditional positive regard, which is a really long word for love. It's the appropriate therapeutic word for love, but that's what it is, right? Be a loving presence, which helps a person co-regulate, but it's also showing that system in front of you that people can be trustworthy, people can be loving, and people can be safe, and people can be gentle. And that experience is something that heals when you're experiencing it. It's not because you're changing a thought or you're changing words or you're teaching somebody to resist doing something. You're having an experience that's transformative. So lean into those moments.
Yeah. For the therapist, listening to stories and validating and believing is, I think, and that's what attunement is. That's what attachment-based therapy is carrying the way that a parent cares about a baby, about every little thing. Oh, that hurt. Oh, that was scary. Every little thing. Yeah. So I have had, part of the chaos of the last 3 years is I have actually sought out therapists just to tell my story again and just to tell my story again. And so I am so grateful And my teen parts have each written their story. And then we have taken whatever 8, 12 therapy sessions just to read it to a therapist, because it's powerful just to have a story and to have it heard. Now I know I don't need to hire therapists to tell my story. I've got friends. So for anybody out there lonely, there is so much. I've got a plural resource sheet. I don't know how to get that out to any people who are new to the community, but there are all kinds of groups. There are writing groups, art groups, support groups. There are ways to make, you can create groups. So I created a group, and we are a closed group of 6, and that's the power of it. Is it's really nice to be in a closed group sometimes.
Yes. Because then you get to know each other on a really nice, deeper level.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the people that are afraid of EMDR? Maybe they had a bad experience with EMDR. Like, what would you say to them?
In my opinion, it's not the system that can't do EMDR. And I might be wrong, so I say that humbly. Maybe there are systems that are not well suited for EMDR, just like I am not well suited for CBT. But I wonder how many systems who are afraid of EMDR or have had a bad experience with EMDR. One of two things. One is there are times, like me, my system, spring 20 April 22 to August 22, there are seasons where there's too much chaos and there's a need for storytelling, validation, getting to know parts without EMDR as a prep. And I think EMDR even has language for that. There's the preparatory phase, so I don't need to know the language, but your therapist should know how to get ready for that. So maybe it's just not the right time. Maybe when you did EMDR before with your current therapist or a previous therapist, maybe your system just wasn't ready. Your system might be one that cycles in and out of doing EMDR or not, where I say that we had an EMDR addiction. We wanted it every session.
That's funny.
We want to do 40 hours a week. We didn't. But the other thing is, I wonder how many times it's not the system that isn't appropriate for EMDR. I wonder how many times it's that the therapist, and I'm not judging the therapist, but the therapist doesn't yet, just like a beginner driver, that beginner driver who has just passed their driving test is not ready to drive a truck. So maybe the therapist is not ready to work with a system in EMDR, or maybe they're not. There might be something about the therapist. So if you work with a therapist and do EMDR and it doesn't work for you, I recommend that you try somebody else. And I know that that can be a long, tedious path. I do love that Institute for Creative Mindfulness is training therapists. And they have a directory, and I'll just put a plug out there that I find the directory difficult to use. So you might email the admin if you need help finding local therapists. I do think that EMDR should be done with systems in person. So I would not do it. That's my opinion. That's just me talking. I would not do it virtually. But even the ones at Institute for Creative Mindfulness may be beginners and may need your patience. But I really don't, in my opinion, I wonder how many systems who have had trouble with EMDR, it's not the system. I wonder how often it's the therapist.
I think a whole bunch of things. And I don't have all the answers either, but from the benefit of just clinical experience, my experience has been a number of things that everything that you're saying can be true. And it can also be that people just have preferences for different ways of healing. And some people may prefer a somatic-based approach. Somebody may prefer sensory motor. Somebody might prefer an IFS type presentation. And I also want to just name that not everyone has the ability to access formal therapy. And it's so difficult to find providers who are willing to work with systems or who have experience. So I think what you're talking about is really, really important. And in life with a variety of people living in a variety of socioeconomic situations and cultures, it can be really hard. Sometimes there's only one person available in your insurance to be able to use EMDR with, and it may not work for you. That doesn't mean you can't heal, though. So I think I just wanted to throw that out there, that there's so many different, it's complicated.
It is complicated.
I think what you're saying is absolutely on target, and it's still complicated. This has been amazing. Really, really have enjoyed this conversation. And feel like there are so many places for both people who are systems, their supporters to understand deeper, and also providers to maybe consider some things a little bit differently than you may have experienced or you may be practicing. And as a provider, you might be listening to this going like, damn, I'm doing a good job because I'm doing all those things. And that's great, right? Like that's wonderful.
Yay.
So hopefully those folks are feeling affirmed. What is one takeaway that you would love people that are listening to just carry with them as they wind down from our conversation?
I really think community is so important. Systems, there's community for you. If you haven't, my system was alone back then. Even as an adult, in an abusive marriage, I couldn't make other friends because I was in a trauma response the whole time. So you were probably alone back then. That's why you're a system. And there are resources for not being alone now. It takes time and it takes initiative and it takes risk taking because, all the people I'm counting as friends now might get sick or might get tired of me or, this is a whole new journey that I'm on right now. So I can't say that I'm fully over feeling insecure, but there's community for you. There is community.
And we can also link some ideas for community in the show notes from this, potentially some of your favorite places, the Healing Together conference, places on Instagram. Like social media actually is a great place for people to meet each other. It's kind of gotten a strange rap from certain sectors, but overall it's been a really beautiful place for people to learn, to connect. I love our Instagram community and our Substack community. And
yeah, me too. Yeah, I would say that what I did, so I started to have my crisis in 22. I went to First Healing Together in 23. And it wasn't until 24 that I actually was not hysterical to be able to take initiative. But I joined twice as many. I joined 6 groups and I only needed 3. So then I could narrow it down to the ones that felt authentic and resonated with me. And then I was just constantly looking for who are the people that I have things in common with and I might want to spend more time with. So COVID was bad, but one of the good things about COVID is that we don't have to live in the same place as each other to be community. Because I don't know any plural. Well, I know one plural person in my state, in my city. So
it's true though. Like some of the people that, gosh, I mean, meeting people across the ocean and feeling really, really close to them.
Yeah, right.
You find kindred spirits across the globe and you develop these beautifully close relationships.
Yeah. And then to meet plural people in person ups the ante. So yeah, the first plural friend I met, I spent 5 nights at her house and rocked and tapped the entire. I was so overwhelmed by how beautiful. I couldn't stop rocking, and she said, "Oh, I just thought that's how you always were." Nope, that was you. You were healing me rapid pace. So.
First time that we went to the Healing Together conference with over 400 systems and therapists, et cetera, present was overwhelming, beautiful, affirming, overwhelming, phenomenal, incredible, overwhelming. Have I mentioned overwhelming? But it's a phenomenal experience.
Yeah. Healing sometimes hurts and healing is overwhelming. So it's really confusing. When good things happen, it can feel really bad. And you kind of have to just go with it and then wait till later to see the outcome of it. Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for this conversation. This has been absolutely beautiful.
It's been a joy. I'm honored. Thank you.
And to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We hope it supports you in your journey, whether you are a system, a supporter, or a provider walking alongside systems. If you found value in this, we would love it if you shared it with others who might benefit from it. For some bite-sized support, follow us at Healing My Parts on Instagram, or for some more substantial support, subscribe to our Substack. And for other offerings and some sassy merch, please check out our website at healingmyparts.org. And until next time, let's keep healing. Thank you for tuning in. You can find our blog on Substack at healingmyparts.substack.com and on Instagram at healingmyparts. Just a disclaimer,
Any information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional therapy or behavioral health care, nor does listening to the podcast constitute a therapist-client relationship. Please be sure to take extra good care of you. And until next time, keep healing and thriving.